Good morning. Welcome, friends. Welcome, Lou.
Good morning. How are we doing today?
Good, good. Friends, I was telling Lou that today, I was going to do like 4 or 5 verses. And as I was preparing for this, I realized that there's so much that I have to put in here into this 1 verse, 2 verses that I'm going to be doing today. I'm going to be doing chapter 18, verses 45 and 46. And there's so much that instead of squeezing it in and trying to do too much, that I would give a lot of time to this verse, which I think is going to be pretty important for you. So I'm going to use the entire 1 hour or 50 minutes, however it turns out to be, to do verse 45 and 46 of chapter 18. And you'll see why it's this important in your life. So verse 45 says, and I have 3 versions of it. So, I was trying to write it down so you'd look at it from different angles. Mm-hmm. One verse, one attains fulfillment by devoting oneself to one's own characteristic, gunas. If one is engaged in action according to one's own karmas, one attains fulfillment. Probably doesn't make a lot of sense to many of you listening to it for the first time, but let me go to the second. And then I'll give you a personal example that might make it clear. My example. Second one, each one of us has our own prescribed duties. Doing our own duty gains success. Listen to how a person devoted to his own duty gains success. That's the second. Mm-hmm. Third one is, a person experiences satisfaction that comes from doing what he is supposed to do. He loves what he's doing and doesn't want to do somebody else's job. By doing his own karma, a person can become enlightened. Now you may wonder what all of this is about. And keep in mind that Krishna is talking to Arjuna. Arjuna is a soldier. His father was a soldier, his grandfather was a soldier, his whole family was soldiers, so soldiering was in his blood. And and if you remember at the beginning of this Gita, Arjuna says to Krishna, I can't kill my own relatives. They're facing me on the opposite side, my cousins, my uncles, people who are dear to me. I can't kill them. I'd rather not be a warrior. I'll just go be a hermit or something. I'll do something else. I'll become a teacher. And Krishna says, no, you are your karma, your duties, your gunas, your characteristic, your personal makeup is that of a warrior. You will not be happy doing anything else. So that's what he's referring to here. Now, given that, I just want to let you know that when I was young, and I'll talk about this more in the next episode next week, but just a small smattering. My family, we were 4 brothers. My older 3 were engineers. My mother wanted me to be a physician. And so I went into medical school. And although I was a very successful physician, made a good name for myself, and you will see from my earlier episodes that Lou and I did together, which were just memoirs of a psychiatrist, that I was very successful and quite well known as a psychiatrist and did well for myself. My mother also told me, she said, promise me one thing. As a physician, you're not going to do what some physicians do, which is to just make money by doing x-rays and CAT scans and tests just to make money. You are a very smart person. If you want to make money, you can do other businesses. And I said, I swear to you, Mom, I will do that. So I did a lot of other businesses. I started a bank, all kinds of other things. And I did well for myself. And here's the key. My gunas, my karma is what I'm doing now, which is to teach, which is to do the scriptures. That's at my core. Mm-hmm. Doing other things, although they were extremely remunerative and made me money and gave me power and title and all of that, it just rubbed me not the right way. Right. I wasn't as peaceful and content doing that as I am doing what I'm doing now. I'm not getting paid for what I'm doing, but it just fills me with satisfaction. And what Krishna says is, when you do what your gunas, your karma is meant for you to do, you will gain satisfaction, happiness, etc. So, and this goes on for the whole 1 hour. And it's quite fascinating And you'll see that we'll talk about this. He talks about this now repetitively for a number of verses and in different ways. So you'll hear about this. By doing one's karma, a person can become enlightened. What that means is that when you're doing something that you ought to do, that's something that is ingrained in you, you feel happy doing it. And by doing that, slowly but surely, your negativity starts to leave you. If you do it regularly on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, etc., your negativity leaves you, number one. Your raga dvesha, your likes and dislikes, also start to fade away, and that gets you closer to becoming enlightened. So doing karma alone is not enough. You have to take care of your gunas and your skills. So, for instance, Arjuna is a kshatriya. If he says, okay, I'm just going to be a doctor, or I'm going to be trader, merchant, that sells things, he loses skills as a kshatriya. So he has to keep honing his skills as a kshatriya. A person who says, I want to teach, I want to learn scriptures and I want to teach those, then that person has to be on top of his game. Otherwise, he won't be as good. Now, recognize that the Krishna says, even though you'll be happy doing what your own gunas are, you may not be the best at it. You may not make money doing it. You may not do well. You may not become famous. You may not get power. However, you will get great satisfaction, happiness, and you get closer to becoming self-realized if you do what your ingrained nature is. So when Arjuna does his actions according to his kshatriya nature, which is to fight, because after the Gita sermon, he fights and he wins, his entire personality supports the action. And that's what's happening with me as I'm doing this. His body, my body, mind, intellect, sense organs all go along willingly. And the individual finds fulfillment in the action that he's doing according to his gunas. Now, circumstances and environment may not permit every one of us to do what we want to do. Yet, you should pursue whatever you can to the extent that you can.
Right.
Slowly but surely, your inner vasanas, your prakriti, your inherent nature will shine through as you start continuing to follow doing what you ought to do. So now, verse 46, this is where we get into the heart of the matter. A person gains success by doing one's own duty while worshipping Brahman, from whom, watch this, while worshipping Brahman, from whom all beings emerge and by whom all this is pervaded. May not make a lot of sense to you, but I'll explain it. Krishna says, dedicate all your actions to the Lord. All beings emerge from the Lord, from Brahman. Also, all activities of all beings emerge from the Lord, and the ability to act emerges from the Lord. Now, one thing that you should also remember is that I grew up in a very religious family, and growing up at an early age, my mother, I mentioned my mother a lot because I learned a lot about all of these spiritual things. She'd never been to school, wasn't educated, but she was a brilliant person when it came to teaching about the scriptures, etc. She taught me about different murtis like Ganesh or Shiva, Vishnu, Lakshmi, all of these deities. Then when I started learning about the Gita and the Upanishad says, Krishna says, you can worship God with a form like Jesus and a cross, or Ganesh with an elephant-headed god, or you can worship God without a cross. Krishna does not say that you have to worship with a deity, and it doesn't say you have to worship without a deity. That's very important. A lot of people, as they listen to this, may say, listen, I'm not going to pray to a cross, because what does that mean? It's just a symbol. I'll pray directly to God, who is not visible. Brahman is consciousness. Consciousness does not have a form. I'll worship to that. But it's a disadvantage. I found that it to be a disadvantage. So keep this in mind. A lot of people, Hindus who are listening to this, many, worship God as Ganesh, elephant-headed God. Now, you and I both know there's no elephant-headed God up there in the skies looking down at us, but it does make a difference. And I'll tell you an example. Some time ago in the New York Times, I read that there was a Jewish guy, a Hasidic student, who grew up in a very religious family. And he said, if I left school and I went to my friend's house and I was starving hungry, and he ordered a pizza that had pepperoni on it, because it was pepperoni was pork or ham, whatever, I couldn't eat it. And no matter how my mouth would salivate, I would not allow myself, for the fear of God, to eat this.
Right.
So he says, when I finished school and I went to college, I went to Boston. Terrible place, this Boston, right, Lou?
I think it's
So
pretty good. I like it.
so he says, when I went to Boston to go to college, he says, my Jewish friends said, listen, those are old fashioned things. You can do what you like, eat what you like. So he says, I started eating everything, including shellfish. And I ate a lot of shellfish, which I would never tell my family about, because my fear of quote unquote God, or what God would say, disappeared. He says, I ended up very, very sick. He had a condition known as Wilson's disease.
Oh.
Shellfish has a lot of copper in it.
Mhm.
And by eating a lot of copper, he ended up extremely sick. And he said, you know what? I went back to not eating all of that, and I was fine. Now, I'm not saying that it was God that punished him. Don't get me wrong. What I'm saying is that there's some power that occurs within us when we feel that we have quote unquote God on our side.
Right.
And that may be a much more immature way of thinking about God than the Vedic way, which is to think about God as all pervading and just pure consciousness. It may be a more immature way of thinking of God with a form like Ganesh or Shiva or whatever. However, for those of us who are not self-realized, it may be an easier way to think of God as as something that is on a cross, or a person that is on a cross like Jesus, or Ganesh, with whom you have a personal rapport, and that kind of thing, like this Jewish boy who started eating everything. So
It
with
takes a
that,
lot of devotion and energy to think of Brahman as consciousness and as something less vague is the wrong word, but less centric than a god. And so it can be easier to worship God in the form of Ganesh or Jesus or whatever it is for you.
yeah,
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 just
yeah.
get that into your day-to-day life.
Listen, I've been doing this for many, many years, and I have found that only when I go back to what I learned as a child, which is that Ganesh is, I have a relationship with him, I find it much more comforting than to think of God as an ethereal consciousness, which I can't relate to.
Right.
So I'm just saying that to those of you who are listening to this, that if you've been used to praying to God in a certain way, follow that. You don't have to change, because this verse is saying, worshiping Brahman, from all, from whom all beings emerge. Keep him uppermost. Dedicate all your actions to him. All beings emerge from him. What does all this mean? Dedicate all your actions. Now, again, growing up in the Hindu culture, whatever you do, you bow your head and you say, I'm doing it for you, God. So this will require some explanation. So bear with me. Brahman is the origin of all creation. Brahman pervades everything, every being, every person. And I will explain this in depth, and it will interest you a great deal. So please bear with me. Gold pervades a necklace. You look at a necklace and it looks very beautiful, very ornate, very carved, but what is it really? What is it? It's gold, right? You should be, he says, focusing on the gold, not the necklace. Because this world, this whole creation, or each being is Brahman. You are not seeing it as Brahman. You're not seeing a person, the Grand Canyon, trees. You're not seeing it as Brahman. You're seeing it as objects. Therefore, you don't see the Brahman behind it. So if you focus on the necklace, you won't see the gold. You're just focusing on the beauty of the necklace. As long as you're involved in that, focusing on the necklace, you won't see the gold. As long as you're focused on a human being, this looking this way, sharp nose, not sharp nose, dark skin, light skin, you're not going to see Brahman, the world. You can't see. The analogy of the snake and the rope. Many of us in the twilight have seen something on the ground. You say, oh, that looks like a snake, perhaps. And as long as you see it as a snake, you will not see it as a rope. The minute somebody flashes something on it, and through knowledge you say, this is a rope, you will never again see it as a snake. So similarly, Once you get the realization that this is all Brahman, you will never again see it as the world or as human beings. So 46, which is this verse, to 49 is all a spiritual discipline of karma, action. That's what we're going to be talking about for the next few verses. Verse 50 to 53 is jnana, wisdom. Verse 54 to 55 is bhakti or devotion, and 56 to 58 is meditation. Now, here's an interesting piece of information, that how does action or karma come about? And it all starts with consciousness. Mm-hmm. That the source of all action, believe it or not, is consciousness. What is consciousness? Being aware of is consciousness. Because of consciousness, through our many previous lives and our current life, you develop what are known as impressions, right? I eat something sweet or nice. I like it. My tongue says, whoa, that's nice. Only because I have consciousness. My tongue develops an impression, and my mind therefore registers it to say, I like this sweetness. I like the taste of this. Raga. You develop raga, you eat something else that tastes horrible, you develop dvesha, dislike. Raga and dvesha develop because of your consciousness, and that gets marked in you as a vritti, as a like and a dislike, a carved in you that goes on from life to life. You get born the next life with that same raga and dvesha. At an early age, you say, I don't like this, I like this. I don't like that, I like that. So all our impressions are stamped firmly onto our intellect, and then from our intellect, our buddhi. Why? Because of our deciding power in the intellect. Intellect decides this or that. So intellect then is the first one that gets the impression. From the intellect, it goes to the mind. The mind is really the birthplace of desires, emotions. And the mind then says, I want that sweet thing that I like. I don't want to eat that which I don't like. The mind receives these decisions from the intellect and plans and plots its likes and dislikes and how to obtain those things that it likes. So
This is the whole principle of advertising, right? They show you a slice of pizza, and you get the thought of you want a piece of pizza, and then you start going into action. And
that's right. Yeah. And here in the United States, after 8 o'clock in the evening is when they bombard you with ads about food, all kinds of different things, because they know now is the tamasic time. You're going to be sitting on your couch, and they can bombard you with pizza ads, ice cream ads, all kinds of things like that.
All they need is that first thought. That's how they're trying to
exactly from the thought come. So the source of all action is first consciousness, then impressions. From impressions, it goes to the intellect as likes and dislikes, to the mind. And from the mind, after it desires, sees this and has desires, the mind pushes it to the pranas. The pranas function because of the mind and its desires. And then from there, it goes to the sense, the organs of action. Right. And then you're propelled towards doing an action. So action comes originally as a consciousness. So let's move on. The mind, when you're dreaming, when you're fast asleep and you're having a dream, you live in this dream world. You really, truly believe you're in the dream world. But the dream actually originates in the mind. There's no real dream world. Mm-hmm. It's just originating in your mind. Similarly, if somebody were to tell you that all of this that you're experiencing, although it's real, don't get me wrong, this table that I'm sitting on is real. If I punch it, my hand will get hurt because it's hard. I'm not saying this is not real, but it is a form of Brahman that has presented itself. Everything around me, everything that you see, everything that you live, just like in your dream world, is part of Brahman. That's a very important concept to understand. Yeah. The mind produces the dream world. Brahman produces the waking world. You believe that you are in the dream world, and you are now believing that you are in this waking world. This spiritual knowledge that you and I are getting together wakes us up from our bondage to this world. And once you see this whole world as part of Brahman, you say, I understand, it's pretty, it's nice, I like it, I don't like it, but it's just Brahman. If I can understand that all of this is Brahman, that becomes less and less. So how do you do that? You bring the Lord into your life. You bring Ganesh, you bring Jesus, you bring whatever it is that you have as a symbolic expression of Brahman, bring it into your life. How? You offer every action, everything you do, you start with habit. You offer every action to the Lord. And while you're doing anything, whatever it is, anchor your thoughts to Brahman and say, Aham Brahmasmi. I am Brahman. Tat Tvamasi. You are that. I am Brahman. I am that. I am God. I am the Supreme. I am. Like an actor on a stage. If you're acting on a stage, what do? You believe that you are that actor, you are that thing, that the role that you're playing. I am King Lear, for instance, and you act as it, but part of you knows that who you really are. So you're going through the world with your act that you believe you are XYZ, but internally, one part of you knows that you're really Brahman. Thus, if you keep going this way, you realize that you are your own self. Lou, before I go to the next set of points, anything that you need to add, or you think that I make that clear?
No, I think it's very clear. In fact, we've gone over these types of concepts before, and this is a summary chapter in the Gita, but with even more clarity this time. Your explanation is very good, but I also think we have more tools to accept what we're hearing at this point.
Okay, great.
Yep.
So when you say Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman, Brahman, you may say, is eternal. Brahman was never born, never dies. So, but I died. I was born. What do you think? How can I be Brahman? I was born and I will die, right? That is your argument to say, I can't be Brahman. You don't believe you're Brahman because you see yourself as different from Brahman. Why do you see yourself as Brahman? Because you look at the form, the given form. Now, we've talked before that when you're born, you're not created at the time. Your Atman has always been there for years, thousands, millions of years. It has never died. It has never been born. Your Atman exists and continues to exist. The only thing that is new is your body. When you're born, the only thing that is created is a new body for you. Now, you see yourself different from Brahman because you're now recognizing yourself as that body. You identify with that body. In reality, you didn't get born. Only a new body got born. What was born? That body. The body, the mind, the sense organs. And what is that? Those sense organs, that body, the mind? The scriptures say it is just purely 5 elements. The 5 elements that we talked about in previous episodes as Prakriti, matter. The spirit, the Atman, you, my friend, never died, was never born. That's your spirit. You are you and have been you for millions of lives before this. The only new thing is this new body made of matter, the same matter which every body, every being, everything is made of, which is the 5 elements: space, air, fire, water, and earth. Space, air, fire, water, and earth. Now, those are the 5 main elements. There's also many elemental particles which are different, but ultimately they all go back into those 5 main elements. What was created and what was born is just those 5 elements and the elementals, which is your physical body, your mind, your sense organs, etc. Now, most religions think that God made you, me, all of us beings as separate from Him. All beings, God made them. So then the question is, well, if God made these things, then God is separate from them, right? So it's like a potter taking clay to make a pot. It's like a jeweler taking gold, melting it down, beating it with his little hammer, and making a necklace. God taking some material, air, space, all of this, and making a body that says, okay, now this is you. So if God made beings, and God made the entire universe, the religions say, if God made the entire universe, Mars, Moon, Mercury, etc., and God made Earth, and God made the beings, then where's God? Oh, God is outside the universe. Where? He's in heaven. Where's heaven? So, it sort of falls upon itself that argument. But what does the Upanishad say? Fascinating. It says that God made the universe of himself. God made you of himself, like a spider makes a web of
Right.
itself, so that God is not separate from you, like the potter and the clay, or God is part of you and part of this universe. So where is my, this is something that I've said, my mother told me all along, that if you, everything, every living thing, every non-living thing has God in it. So Brahman is the material itself. Brahman is not just the spirit, but Brahman is also the material, the prakriti, the space, the air, the fire, the earth, all of that. And as you will see as we go along, Brahman is also alive in that. And we'll see that. Brahman is not just the maker, but also the material, the cause. So we see cause and effect. Cause and effect. Here, Brahman is the cause, and he's causing you to be born. He's the maker, and he's also the material. Therefore, since Brahman is in you, the material, that material is conscious. Since Brahman is consciousness. This is brilliant explanation. Why? Because oftentimes going through medical school, I would see when I learned about clotting, right? I would say when I got a cut, I said, how beautifully does this cut heal itself? I'm not telling it to heal itself.
Right.
Isn't this fascinating? My brain, your brain doesn't tell that clotting thing, except for those who have clotting factor deficiency. Your blood will clot. And you say, well, what gave it that ability to clot? Such a large gaping cut that didn't need sutures, thank goodness. How did it heal itself? Because there's consciousness in every one of our cells. Something that we can't explain causes different kinds of reactions within these different cells because it's not inert. It is conscious. You eat something, it gets digested, it knows exactly what juices to secrete, exactly what to cause to. Even if you eat a stone, the stone will get digested or and pass. Somehow the body knows everything. So why? Because it's not inert, it's conscious. Now, we talked before about all beings, from whom all beings emerge, and by whom all this is pervaded. By whom all this is pervaded, from whom is the creation of the beings and all these elements that constitute the world, and that is Brahman. So all beings are created, as we said, the universe is created because of Brahman, and everything is pervaded by Brahman. What does that mean? Pervaded by Brahman. The truth about creation is that things keep disappearing. This is the truth, whether you like it or not. Things keep disappearing. What does that mean? Analyze any creation. It's only a name. What? Yeah, because I have a name right now, which I haven't given in these podcasts for on purpose. But when I die, only my name remains. And after I die, after a while, that name disappears also, unless, like some people do, they want their name on everything. So they carve their name on institutions that they give money to. They write books and they put their name on it. But the person who wrote the Gita, you don't see a name on it. The Upanishads, you don't see a name on it. So the name disappears. When the object is gone, the name is gone. So you have a pot, right, made of the potter who took clay to make it, beautiful pot that you have. When the pot gets crushed and converted back to clay, where's the pot? Nowhere. What is the name of the pot? Pot. When the pot becomes clay, what is pot? Nothing. There's no pot there. It's only clay. But then when you take the clay and you analyze it, it breaks down into the various atoms and molecules that makes clay. What are those atoms and molecules? Nothing but Brahman. So ultimately, Upanishads say that all of this, if you analyze it, all is just name and shape and appearance. And ultimately, all is just pure Brahman. So Brahman has the knowledge, the power, the ability to create and to pervade, to create and to pervade. That's what that verse was saying, that all beings are created by Brahman and Brahman pervades all beings. Very important two words. The entire universe And each and every being, every tree, every bush is created by Brahman and pervaded by Brahman. He doesn't need anybody's help to create it, and it doesn't need any new or outside material. What does that mean? It doesn't need any outside material. Outside material, the jeweler, when he makes a necklace, needs outside material. He needs the gold. The potter, when he makes pots, needs the clay. But a spider just uses his glands to produce a web. And it creates a beautiful web that he hangs up in a corner to catch flies. But it's all coming from himself. Speaking of spider, my sons and my grandsons took me to a movie last weekend, brand new, Spider-Man. Did you see it, Lou? Have you heard about it?
I've heard about it. I haven't seen it yet.
And you know, the beauty of that is, like the old Spider-Man or Superman, they actually had to take on a costume and put it on themselves. This guy called Peter.
Yep.
And he puts on the Spider-Man costume. But in this new movie, when danger comes towards him, the costume just automatically comes about. Immediately he changes into Spider-Man. He doesn't have to actually he doesn't have to put on a costume. He becomes Spider-Man.
Nice.
Just because, you know, he doesn't have to press a switch or anything, he just becomes it. This concept of Brahman and God is very similar to that. God becomes you, God becomes me, God becomes that cow, that God becomes that elephant. He just becomes it, just like Peter becomes Spider-Man at the time. So keep that in mind, because a potter needs pot, a jeweler needs gold. God doesn't need anything to create this universe. He just creates it of himself. Therefore, everything is Brahman. Now comes the word, so that's creation. Next one is pervasion, pervading. When the potter made the pot out of clay, he didn't create the pot first and then clay to pervade it, right? He made the pot out of the clay. The clay pervaded the pot throughout from the beginning. Without the clay, the pot wouldn't be there. Similarly, Brahman didn't create the universe or you and me first and then comes into us. So we think about this, and this is a misconception that God pervades us. God is a soul within us, and God comes out of us like a wisp of smoke and flies away.
Right.
God didn't create a being first and then pervade you. Brahman doesn't pervade you after creating it. Brahman is you. The clay is the pot. Brahman is you. You are Brahman. That thou art. Tat Tvamasi Aham Brahmasmi. You are Brahman. Brahman pervades you. He is in every cell of your body. So how do you relate to Brahman? As 5 elements? Do I look at a person and say, oh, that's space and air and fire and earth and water? No. You don't relate to your spouse like that. You may recognize. I mean, as a physician, right? You know what every person is, which artery is, how many blood vessels are there, veins, arteries, lymph vessels. You don't see your child as a bunch of lymph vessels and blood and bones. You see your child as an entity. You don't want to see God as this ephemeral, whatever the word is, arbitrary kind of thing. You want to see it as a person, which makes it easier to relate to Brahman. So you don't see Brahman as 5 different elements. You see Brahman as you would see your parents, your spouse, your children, as an entire entity. You see it similar to Brahman and God. But then you say, well, how do I do that? Where is Brahman? Right? Where is Brahman? I don't see where Brahman is. So imagine that my grandson, little or granddaughter, 3.5 years old, is saying, where is my grandfather? And I'm sitting on my rocking chair and I'm fast asleep. And she comes up to me and she first calls my name, calls me as grandfather. She calls me Papi. She says, Papi, Papi, calls me to wake me up. Now, sometimes I might hear the word, my name being called, and wake up. So by just uttering my name, she has woken me up, gotten the entire entity of grandpa to relate to her. Or she just grabs a little part of me, a little finger, and starts to shake it. and that wakes up the entire entity, me. And now I'm able to say, well, what do you want? Similarly, God can be reached in a variety of ways because he is present in everything. So you can relate to God in that respect by reaching him. So it's not hard or impossible to reach God just by reaching him through one of these means. Now, Brahman, God, consciousness, whatever that force is that we cannot, Upanishads say that you just cannot conceive of God. You can't. You can't think about it. You just don't understand it. And you shouldn't even try. You can only become God. You cannot understand it. You cannot fathom it. You cannot intellectually even conceive of it. But that God keeps everything moving very smoothly. The Hindu mythological drawings of Vishnu, who is the one who maintains the world, shows Vishnu lying down on a Milky Way, on a serpent, looks like Milky Way, and he's lying with his head on his arm, just relaxing. That's for a specific reason. They're saying that God makes this whole universe and everything around it move while he's just relaxing completely. The Milky Way, says, shows it's coming out of a belly button, and on that is Vishnu lying down. The belly button is the center of the galaxy, which they knew back then. And through that comes our Milky Way, and on that he's resting. And in spite of him being completely like half asleep with his head resting on his arm, he's just smiling and looking around, and everything is happening. What is everything happening? The earth revolves at an exact speed for billions of years. If it were to change its velocity by even a few fraction of speed, it would destroy everything. Every planet that revolves in its axis goes the exact same. I mean, it's incredible. I just cannot imagine how it can go on. The gravity, the gravitational forces, humidity on this earth, the exact percentage of oxygen, nitrogen, carbon dioxide in this earth, the humidity, it's the way our bodies function. All of that is happening because of Brahman. Our science can never, I mean, we can't get our trains to run on time, forget about anything else. We can't cook our food to be exactly the way we would like it to be cooked. So, I mean, but Brahman makes all of this done, and he does it in such a relaxed way. Why do they show Vishnu lying down instead of working at it? Because they're saying that Brahman does it easily, with ease. Why? Because he himself is in it. He's not making it happen. He's not doing it by telling somebody else to do it, but he himself is doing it. So how does he do that? By laws. So there are three different kinds of laws. One is like man-made laws. Man-made laws are like traffic laws. You may not speed, you may not go through a red light, you can't, do all kinds of things like that. Those are man-made laws. Then there's our laws of Brahman, laws of nature. Laws that if you throw something up in the air, it will come down and fall. No question about it. There are various laws of nature like that. And then there are universal laws that we didn't make as men, but are there. For instance, it doesn't matter if you're an Eskimo or a Chinese person or Russian person or American or Indian, you wouldn't want to stand on my toes and hurt me. If you did that, I don't care what language it is, I'll curse you in that language. You'll be cursed. You don't want somebody stepping on your toes. You don't want somebody flirting with your daughter or doing anything to your wife. Those are universal laws. Mm-hmm. And these universal laws, everybody, no matter which country you're from, knows. You don't have to be taught that. You don't need to be told that you can't hit somebody, you can't step on their toes, you can't push them, you can't, offend somebody's spouse, etc. Those are universal laws. And nobody can say, I didn't know, because these universal laws are known just by being a human being, no matter which country you're from. This is important. Those universal laws, here's key. Following those universal laws or not following those universal laws is where your will comes in. Your will, should I do it? Should I not do it? If you do the wrong thing, then that is your karma. So you have a certain will. You say, I know I shouldn't be doing this. Well, how do you know it? It's not written down anywhere. It's not like a traffic law. You know it because it's a universal law. And you do it anyway, you will pay the price. When you know something it doesn't have to be done, universal law, you do it, you pay the price. You do what you ought to do, you get the reward. So those universal laws that said you shouldn't be doing this or you should be doing this, this is also another definition of dharma. Dharma, one definition is that the what it is. So sugar is sweet. So the essence of sugar is sweetness. That's the dharma of sugar. Dharma of sugar is sweetness. So whatever your being is, your gunas, that's your dharma. That's one explanation. The second explanation is that whatever is your universal law that should be done that way, that is your dharma. Now, when your will, what you ought to do, what you didn't ought to do, you do it. If it goes against your dharma, essentially it's going against Brahman. So you don't want to do anything that is against your dharma because that goes against Brahman, and therefore you will pay the price. So whatever duty you have, this is going back to where we're coming around full circle now towards the end of our episode. Sorry about this long-winded thing. My throat is dry. Lou, you're smiling.
It's fascinating. Yeah.
Doing one's duty with worship to Brahman is what they're telling us to do. Doing your duty. Now, this doing one's duty encompasses everything that we just said. Whatever your will is, do what you ought to do. Whatever your dharma is, whatever it says, you do what that ought to be done. Whatever your gunas, it tells you, yeah, you can be a physician, you can be a banker, you can be a businessman, you can be a real estate man, you make a lot of money, but you'll produce agitation within yourself, you will produce mental agitation, stress, strain, and you won't be happy. But you do what you want to do, what you ought to do, what you like to do, and you will be filled with happiness, and you will burn off your vasanas, and you will get rid of your ragas and your deshas, your likes and your dislikes. Not going to a temple, not chanting mantras or chanting different rosaries, but doing what you ought to do with worship to Brahman. Do your actions and pass it on to the Lord. Devote all your actions to God, and then recognize that there's only one appropriate action. When you're given a choice of what ought to be done, there's only one choice. And when you do the right choice, you get the rewards for it. When you do the wrong choice, you get the punishment. As long as you think you are the doer, you're in trouble. Because you think, I'm the doer, I did this, I get the credit. You're not the doer. Don't apply your name to anything. Just say, God did it. God did it through me. I'm just a vehicle for whatever God's doing. By doing that, you're essentially dedicating your actions to God. And I will promise you, if I could give it to you in writing, I would give it to you in writing. I will promise you, when you do your work that way, you will succeed. You will get all the wealth you want. You will get all the success you want. You will get all the power you want. You will get all the popularity you want, all because you are doing it without actually looking for it. So don't try and trick by saying, do it and then I'll get really what I want is the wealth and the power. No, it has to be truly that you don't want any of this. You're just doing it because you're doing it for Brahman, and all of the rest will follow. Your biggest reward will be that your desires, your vasanas will dissipate, and you'll just be happy doing what you're doing. Your ragas will dissipate, your dveshas will dissipate, your likes and dislikes. Push those away as much as you can. Whenever you see, I have a craving for this, try and control it a little bit, push it away. Choose to do the right thing, and you will be happy. Choose to do what you should have done all along, even if you have to wait. But do this on a daily basis, and your ragas and dveshas will drop off. You will get more knowledge, you'll get success, you'll get wealth, you'll get power, and above all, at some point, you'll get moksha. So, Lou, that was a long dissertation.
All right,
how,
let me see.
how,
Let me see if I can summarize a little bit.
okay.
Without knowledge, we tend to identify too much with our bodies and too much with this world. As we gain knowledge, we move in a more spiritual path to Brahman, and we learn what our true karma is, as opposed to what we believe it is that our body and our desires are telling us. So through knowledge, we become more spiritual. We relate more closely to our karmas, and as we acknowledge that more and honor that more, we feel better.
Yeah. When I was an adolescent, I knew what my calling was. I knew what I should be doing. I knew what I wanted to do. I knew where my interest lay. But I respected my parents a great deal, as was taught to us in the Indian culture. And we prayed to them as if they were gods. And my mother wanted me to be a physician, so I went into medical school. But that was not, I knew what my real interest was. And it took me a long time. And don't forget, the world comes out with tricky curveballs through
Sure.
all of it. Because as that went on, and I came to the United States, the Western world made me, and science and psychiatry, said, God doesn't exist. There's no such thing. What? God with an elephant head? Does that even make sense to you? And I
Yeah.
say, yeah, you know what? Maybe I was wrong all along. Maybe my mother was wrong. My father was wrong. My family, this whole culture, every religion, whether it be Christian religion or Hindu religion, all religions are wrong. There's no God. This is all science. That's the curveball. And only when I started getting back into that, as you saw from my first episode here, where my wife, thank goodness for her, put me back onto this, it was like I was like a dirty car being taken through a car wash and
Right.
cleaned completely. So you're right. It takes a while for you to sink in, but once you recognize what your real gunas are, your nature, you can get back into that.
Excellent. Everyone should find our audio podcasts on Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. While you're there, also we're on Amazon Music and Audible as well. Check them out. We have an Instagram page now. You want to check that out, Gita Memoirs of a Psychiatrist. You can email us at Gita Memoirs of a Psychiatrist at gmail.com. We hope you're enjoying the series. I hope you're enjoying the series as much as I am, because I'm just having a
Thanks, Lou.
blast doing this. And everyone look for the new episodes in a few days.
Thank you. Bye bye.